session for the day is on dynamics of FOH, which will discuss the critical factors to consider for optimum FOH delivery. This will include dealing with FOH mixing positions, better stage and FOH communication, and will also take into consideration various other technical factors such as requirements from monitor mixing, stage sound system design, and acoustics for optimum FOH delivery. I would now like to invite Jayakrishnan Nalinkumar, founder Tag Institute, studio recording and mixing engineer, live sound engineer, and audio educator, who is also the moderator for the session. I would also like to include Vijay Benegal, live sound engineer and co-founder, OdBle Consultants. Mujeeb Dadarkar, sound engineer and co-founder, OdBle Consultants. Mr. Fali Damania, live sound engineer and market development manager at Shure Incorporated. Mr. Dwayne, live sound engineer and application engineer, Alphatec Audio Video Private Limited. At last but not the least, I would also like to include James Baker, senior international sales manager at DiGiCo. Before we begin the session, I would just like to introduce all our panelists. Jayakrishnan Nalinkumar is a 4-time IRA award winner and a world-class sound engineer who specializes in sound recording and mixing, as well as live sound mixing. Vijay Benegal, live sound engineer and co-founder, OdBle Consultants, whose career as an independent sound engineer has spanned close to 3 decades with experience in diverse sound recording and mixing projects. Mujeeb Dadarkar, sound engineer and co-founder, OdBle Consultants, is a well-known name in the music industry. He has been a recording engineer and technical consultant to the audio or video industry since 1983. Fali Damania, live sound engineer and market development manager at Shure Incorporated, has 15 years of experience with the pro audio industry, starting his career at rental company Sound.com before working as a freelance sound engineer at major concerts and festivals. Dwayne, live sound engineer and application engineer, Alphatec Audio Video Private Limited, is an audio professional engineer with industry experience spanning over 35 years. He started his career with Electrocraft in the year 1986, where he got the opportunity to work with the big Indian and international artists like Lata Mangeshkar, Asha Bhosle, A.R. Rahman, Zubin Mehta, Sonu Nigam, and many more renowned names. Let's also welcome James Baker. He's a senior international sales manager at DiGiCo. He was previously the FOH engineer for Neil Rogers and Chic, and FOH technician for some of the largest UK festivals, including Reading and the Isle of Wight. Welcome, everyone. We would now like to start the session.
Can you all hear me? Yep, great. So the session is dynamics of FOH. Now, first, to understand what we're going to speak first, we would like to know the dynamics of the audience here. So we have many known faces out here, and I would like to know how many of you are really into live sound. If you're a live sound mixing engineer, FOH engineer, please raise your hand. Yes, and was okay. And if you are from the rental business, please raise your hands. Okay, cool. So we have many people who are audience also would like to probably know what we are going to discuss out here. So the session is about dynamics of FOH. So it is, just to clarify what it is, we are not going to discuss how do you use a dynamic processor here, but how do you deliver an optimum FOH mix to your audience? What are the factors to consider to make sure that everyone who's seated in the audience enjoy what is going on the stage? So a lot we have like a great panel out here. I think probably the best that you can find, and very experienced engineers, and they have their own specializations as well. So the most important thing is before even you get to any venue for mixing as such is a lot to do with the pre-gig situations. So first to start off, I would like to have one of the panelists. I would like to probably start with Dwayne regarding this. How do you convince that what is being provided, in the tech rider, if let's say you are from a rental background, and how do you ensure that the band receives everything? Because a lot has to do with the budgets and other factors, the promoters, and how do you bring that balance between so that the band receives what they want and the promoter is happy about the budgeting and all that?
I've done a lot of international gigs where we are used as rental vendors, they call them nowadays. And we've been getting riders from various bands with various kind of brands of equipment. Now, I make it very clear that this is what I've got. And this, as far as PA is concerned, I've done gigs with bands like Deep Purple who have come down where we did not have any other brand that was known. It was our own speakers, and a lot of gigs happen like that. Benny has mixed on a few gigs like that, and so I make sure that the band knows, the management knows what I'm giving them. Clarity is very important. As far as these things are concerned, because I don't want them coming to India and finding out, oh, you promised me this, but you don't have that. That is very important. Now, consoles is another story because, yes, normally a rider has one or two brands. So we kind of make it a point to get at least one of them, if not the preferred one, the second one, or maybe sometimes the third one. So that is basically how I start off with sending my replies to their riders. And I try and make sure that everything they want is there. And if there is something that is imperative, sometimes I'm talking about the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, we did not have gear here. So I used to tell them, carry it. My job was basically to deliver the show. The monies was taken care of by the guys who handle finance and the business end of it. So that is where my job ends.
Because we often get into the situation where the promoter calls saying that the budget for this particular show is shooting beyond what we expected, and how can we bring it into control, and how do you satisfy the band's engineers and still keeping the promoters happy?
A tricky question. If you want to do the show, there are a few things that you have to consider. Taking less money is a choice, okay? But you do not compromise what you're delivering because you've chosen to take less money. So that's how we normally do it. If it is really drastic, we say, no, sorry, we put our hands up and say, sorry, we can't do it.
That's right. That's a great thing. So it is about the quality that you are delivering than the money that is being made. Why I'm shooting this question is only if you have the right equipment in any room, then there is a question of what you can even do with it. So does any of you else want to add to this point? How do you tackle the situation with promoter?
I mean, it's something that I don't have to deal with in a general, but I just try not to be silly about putting stuff on your rider sometimes that you don't require, which is quite common. So it's, just be reasonable. Don't add unnecessary amounts of equipment or tech that's not necessarily required.
Right.
And the last thing people want is when you come over there and you have like 5 keyboards on your rider and you use only 2. It's not cool to do that. It's not cool from an engineer's point of view and from a band's point of view, from the promoter's point of view. So just be reasonable on the rider. Spec what you need, 1 or 2 backups at the most for what's there. And I think in most cases, it's never really an issue. And if it is an issue beyond that, then it's really not the 5 of us problem. It's not us then it's something that the management needs to sort out with their promoter.
Right. So, yes, so that's very important, having your rider very optimized.
Oh, I was just going to add. I think the earlier you can communicate with the promoter, with your rider, and as Fali says, make the choices one or two. Don't like list everything that you could ever possibly imagine, because you're literally going to confuse the other end. And generally, with some promoters, and as Fali says, it's not really something I've ever looked into. It's more the riders there. They will go for probably the cheapest option in your rider if you put it. You know, if you can do the job with X and Y, then list that in your rider. But just make sure that the communication that you give them is as early as possible, and that it's a constant two-way communication. That way you can come to an agreement where you know the artist is going to get the best, what they expect from you. And no artist really wants to hear you talk about complaining. That's completely not their job or their interest. So, and really as a front of house engineer, you're more part of the band, because it's a very, there is a lot of artistry in it and a lot of emotion in it, and then having a good front of house tech or a front system technician that you rely on, that is good, and you can get that the best for the artist, really. So communication, as always.
Correct. So thanks, James. Thanks, Fali. So my next question is to Mujeeb, sir. So, yes. So what are the common acoustic-related issues that you face in a venue, and how do you overcome that? So the sort of venues that you mostly, it sometimes might not be the best acoustically treated one. Let's say it's a ballroom or a venue that is not treated, like maybe a show inside a mall or inside a Taj Mahal. So what are the considerations that you take, and how do you overcome such a situation?
You can't always redesign the venue to suit your requirements. Sometimes you have to live with what you have. It may mean a realignment of the speaker system. It may mean different mic placements or different EQs to what you've become accustomed to if it's a show that you've been running before. However, this is true that you cannot rely always on show files, because the show file becomes meaningless if the environment is different. So it's just a known starting point. You have to assess what the room sounds like for that band with that content, and maybe redo stuff, because you have to remember that you're a part of the performance, not a part of the technology. So everything is a tool to achieve an end. Sometimes it happens that it is in your control that you can change certain things. Maybe you can drape a wall that's reflecting because that's bothering you. Maybe some halls have flippable panels, live side, dead side. This means you must know this in advance. If you get thrown into the deep end, it's kind of too late to learn how to swim.
So how often you get the chance to visit the venue prior?
Well, I would say that having done a concert in a particular venue, usually the prior experience is a teacher for how to do it better the next time. But there's always going to be a first time. Right. Which means it's probably a good idea to arrive early, to listen to the PA, to see what that house sounds like, and then make decisions on maybe you need to change your microphones or your placements. I mean, other than that, really, there's nothing else but to go ahead and do it. Really not a lot of choice.
Right.
Can I? So when you come to a situation where you have a room that is very reflective, that's what you meant, right?
Very dead.
Oh, very dead. Yeah, very reflective is more the case. So yeah. So what happens is that when I do something like that, so I'm lucky enough to set up and rig my own system and then mix the band as well, because I can do both. So when I go into the venue, if there's a glass wall that's 20 feet high, you are trying to avoid that, right? As much as possible. So I avoid it by, suppose the room is like 150 feet. I will aim my main speakers to end about 50 feet before the wall, and for the last 50 feet, do a small little box just to get a little bit of intelligibility at the back, which is not going to cause as much slapback or reflections as you would have if you had to have the whole array pointed at the glass. So that is one way of doing it. If the organizer or the promoter is willing to drape the, draping is not going to solve the problem. It will minimize it by, say, 30-40%. It's not going to solve the problem. But by doing this, and hopefully it's a full house, bodies are there to absorb sound, so it should work better than going straight forward.
I think as well, some of the promoters, most of them have experienced those sort of problems before with that venue, so they're aware. And again, it comes down to communicating that back to them, And like I did a show recently, pre-pandemic in Monaco, and the whole of the back of the room was glass. And during the sound check, it was so reflective, and I was at the very back of the room, and I got them. They wouldn't want to shut the curtains, but I got them to shut the curtains because during the show the curtains would be shut. So again, it comes down to just and also. There are a lot of sound image files, out there for all of the venues. So if you have that opportunity during that initial communication to get a sound image file that from a system tech that's used that venue before, because most of these venues we're rolling around them constantly over the years, and we've always been in them before, and then you get that experience as well from that. So if you can get that information, then yeah, it's going to help.
Fali?
I'm sure that you have gone through some challenging venues. So what do you do? Like when you walk into a venue and you find that's the worst venue to mix at?
No, but I think that's where the experience comes in, that you don't try and make an amazing mix at sound check because it's going to change completely once the place gets filled. So get your line check going, get something which is reasonable, and move on rather than spending 3 hours to craft this excellent mix when the place is empty. And you're pretty much going to have to start from scratch once the place is filled up. Or at least, you're going to have to redo a lot of things. So don't waste. And I think the complication comes in more whenever we have bands here with a front of house engineer mixing monitors also. So now you've made a whole bunch of changes to make everything sound reasonable when the place is empty. And now you're going to have to redo a lot of that once the place is filled up. That changes the bands in your mix. And then after the show, no one's happy. So it's like get to a reasonable point, just to get the thing started, and then maybe address a few issues later. And I think one of the most important things that people get wrong is trying to go too loud in a room that already sounds bad. It's softer generally works much better.
Yeah, turning it up is not your friend. Yeah. I work with an artist that I've never once had a sound check in 4 years, ever. And it's always been straight to the show. I've had line checks, but I've never once had a sound check with them.
Right. I think, Benny, you want to add something to it?
What they said.
So I have a specific question to you. So what are the criteria that you mention in your rider, for in terms of systems? So what are you expecting from a system engineer? How do you mention that in your rider?
My rider, how do I specify, what kind of system engineer I'm going to get in my tech rider? I can't do that. Generally what happens is that we try to, in advance, figure out who the vendor is going to be. And hopefully, if it's a vendor like somebody who we've worked with in a long time with, any of these guys, then I don't really have to worry because I know that their systems knowledge, which is superior to mine, I know that they're going to be able to do a much better job than me specifying. I might go there and I might have a word with them about, it's not sounding the way I'd right now, and they'll make the appropriate changes. But I cannot tell them how they should be designing their system and setting up the system for a venue which I'm not really that familiar myself. In connection with what the earlier question was, I very rarely get a chance to actually see the venue in advance. So like what Mujeeb was saying, that if I happen to have done it before, then I already know in advance what's going to happen. So I might be able to speak to the systems engineer in advance, but that's not always the case. So for me, my experience, I've always had to wing it. I get there and hope that the systems guy knows what he's doing and he set it up properly. In my opinion, the systems tech is probably the most important job description in that setup. Because if he doesn't get it right, no matter how much I try, I'm not going to make that mix sound good. It'll be kind of all right, audible, but that the system has to be set up right.
So, in a situation where there's no systems engineer, there is a rental company who have just rigged it, and how do you ensure that if there's no systems engineer, what are the measures that you take to ensure the PA as per what you want?
Well,
Tell them about our story
Yes, please.
where they just left the equipment and went.
see, in situations like that, you just have to, you just have to live with it. It's kind of like what Mujeeb and I had some years ago, where we had a quotation for like a system, and which we approved. And when we get to the venue, it's a different setup, and they've just left the gear over there and gone away. Why? Because the promoter wanted to save a little bit of money. Said, okay, these two guys are engineers, they can set it up. So. Yeah, so at that point now we've got to get the show going, right? So we had to sit and actually set up the consoles, neither of which we were familiar with. So phone calls and that. So I mean, at that point in time, you really just got to make the best. I can't tell them to take the system down because I mean, like at that point in time, I mean, I'm at sound check. What do I do then? So just work within whatever is there. That's how I have to handle it.
What about you? I'm pretty sure, Dwayne, being a systems engineer, you will handle the situation. What about you, Fali? I think you also double as a
They know
system
what
engineer
they're doing.
for Amit Trivedi's shows. So,
No, I always, if it's one thing that I always carry with me is 2 or sometimes 4 calibration microphones, my calibrator, my sound cards, and my laptop with Systune. That will go anywhere. Because I can manage without anything else, but on a day that I require that stuff and I don't have it, I know I'm going to be in. There's only so much you can do, like with your ears. Yeah, you can do a certain amount, but there are some things which you'll not hear it. Or you'll hear that there is something wrong. What is wrong, you'll never know until you have the software open, until you calibrate, until you do some traces, see phase, etc. You can maybe EQ your way out of trouble, but you can't get the phase right without having those tools. And I think in most cases, it's that. So if I don't have my favorite mic, if I don't have my favorite console, if I don't have anything else, it's fine. But that kit will always travel with me.
what's your favorite mic for tuning?
It's not about favorite. It doesn't honestly matter because I think the last few months I got lazy. I didn't want to carry a lot of stuff. So I would just ask the vendor, what do you have? Okay, I have some RTA or DBX microphone. It doesn't matter. It's fine. But I just need to have a phase trace. I need to look at the phase. I need to make sure the subs and the tops are phase aligned. And then I can start from there. But without that, you're just fighting like a losing battle, basically. So that, 2 sound cards, couple of microphones, my software, that will always go. That's always part of my travel kit. The other stuff, if I can't carry, it's fine. But this stuff will always go.
Yeah, just to add to that, I'm still using the same DBX microphone that I bought in 1998, and it still works great. And it's literally phase. That's all I'm needing it for, and I can just time align the system. That's it. But really, when you go to the venue, the thing you should really look for, in my opinion, is coverage and time alignment, and that's the main 2 things I'll check first.
So this is to James. He has been a systems engineer and also a touring front of house engineer. So being a systems engineer, how do you understand what the FOH engineer needs, and how do you have that connection with that engineer and deliver what that person requires?
I'm not a system engineer. I wouldn't call myself a system engineer, but I have the most important thing for me as a front house engineer in tech is the symbiotic relationship you have with your system technician. I've done tours where the system technician and I have been not just friends, but we've worked together a long time, and they know how I mix a show. And generally, I don't mix mid-heavy or high mid-heavy, but I would like to bring that out of my mix when I need it for certain parts of the show, guitar solos or whatever that may be. And this particular system technician, every time he shows me the system, shows me the trace, shows me the EQ, he goes, "This is your flavor, and this is room." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." And then we try a virtual sound check or whatever, and he'll hear me put those frequencies back in that it's done, because it's the way I like to hear a PA. So it is a very symbiotic relationship that you should have with your system technician, you know. And I'm very fortunate that most of the gigs I've done over the last 15 years, I've had a very, very good system guy with me. And the non-verbal communication that goes on during the gig as well. Like you can be at, 98 at front of house, or in some of the peaks level, 106 at front of house. And I can turn and look at my system guy and a facial expression, and they'll just go straight for what I'm looking for, because he's heard it as well, Right. So it's a really strong,
Yeah. Would you like
it's
to
a
add to
strong
this,
bond.
Dwayne? Yeah. Yeah. So how do you deal with your front of house engineer? Like how do you deliver that the systems are right for that particular engineer?
So you do what you think is right, and then every engineer has got his own taste in how he wants to listen to it. You correct it to the best of your ability without. So you know what your system can do, right? So if you think there's enough of subs and the guy is saying, give me 12 dB more of subs, I'm saying, no, I can't do it. It's not going to work, because you're going to crash the limiter, the amp's going to die, and they're going to be left with broken speakers. So it is a question of where your starting point is, and from how much the engineer needs. If he says, give me a little less on low mid or whatever, that's fine, But drastic changes, no. So you have to work together on this. And any sensible engineer is not going to ask for something like this. So it's like a marriage, right? For that day, for that evening. Yeah? So, yeah. So you all have to get along.
So now I have this question to Benita regarding stage monitoring. So how does stage monitoring help a front of house engineer to deliver better? Is there a relation? Yes. Is there a relation between having a good stage mix? Does it affect the FOH mix?
Well, when you say good stage mix, really what you're talking about is if you've got speakers on stage. Now, obviously, if you've got a lot of speakers on stage, wedges, side fills, that sort of thing, that sound, and if it's loud, that's going to bleed into your microphones. Once that bleeds into your microphones, that's mixing with the direct signal that's going on the FOH, which is definitely going to affect what's happening on the main PA. Today, it's using in-ears has really drastically helped, because now, at least the bands that I'm working on, everybody's on in-ears. So the stage sound levels are really low. There's probably just one backup front wedge for the vocalist. So that really makes a big difference, and it has changed the quality of the FOH mix.
I want to ask the same question to Mujeeb sir as well, because a lot of classical musicians still prefer to use wedges. And
Yeah, well, the problem is we would all be happy if we got rid of stage monitors and everybody went on in-ears, because that way the artist can get the exact mix that he wants without interfering with anything else. Unfortunately, there is resistance from the artists themselves. You will hear things like, "No, I feel like an island, I don't want these." Or even worse, they'll want in-ears and wedges, which is now a new complication which doesn't really help. Or out of 6 people, you will have 2 that agree to in-ears, but the others still want stage monitors. This is not helpful. This just complicates matters, and you still end up with a noisy stage. And if you have a noisy stage, you're not going to be able to deal with it in terms of the FOH mix. So, I would recommend to everybody to start considering in-ears, at least, try them out. And, if they work for everybody, then that will be the ideal situation. Unfortunately, we don't always have to deal with the ideal situations. You take what you can get.
So, James, what do you think if you're a singer, like the lead singer of the band, they want to interact with the crowd and, you're still on your in-ears. How do you tackle that situation?
So a lot of, the good way that I've always seen it done, I did monitors for years, but I'm mostly doing front of house now, is audience mics, so they can actually blend in, the monitor engineer blend in the audience mics. But also some of the technology that's coming out now with the immersive in-ear mixing, that is a completely different ball game to a lot of artists that are using it, because they actually don't feel like they're in a goldfish bowl anymore. and that everything's in the 360 degrees. There are certain things that you can hear in life that come from below, and you sort of don't consider them, but you can put certain instruments now down here, up here, and the most important factors. But then again, as I say, blending in maybe multiple audience mics so they can get that interaction. But going back a step to the relationship with the system technician, but you also have to have a great relationship with your monitor engineer, because you're generally friends, that you can communicate and go, if there are a lot of wedges on stage, you can say, look, 160 is killing me at front of house. Can you just take a bit of 160 out of every bit on stage? And that can then improve, the overall performance for the audience, the band, and us guys mixing the show. So, yeah, the 2 points.
Just to add to what he was saying about interaction with the one way is doing with audience mics, but I think a lot of in-ear systems now come with ambient mics, which can be blended into the in-ear mix. So the artist has some control on, so it comes with a pack with a volume control, which the artist can decide, okay, now during a song I want the audience off, and then you can turn it back on in between, and then you can have your interactions.
You put like a lapel mic on them?
No, it comes as a part of the in-ear.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. They're expensive. They're much more expensive solutions, but they're out there. I think Sensophonics has something like that, and FIR Audio also has. I mean, a number of them have got it.
Okay.
In-ears now as well have the gap, so you can actually, yes, yeah.
Right. Fali, do you want to add anything to this?
Audience mics, there's no other solution. Like a minimum of four audience mics, 2 in the front. If it's a singer with a band, 2 in the front, XY, 2 on the sides, and if you're mixing, you need to keep a track of those audience mics. You don't want them to be too close to the audience necessarily. You don't want someone shouting from there to come straight into the mic. So you don't generally point it to the audience. Make it ambient. Point it in an ambient fashion, basically. Right. And I find there's a certain point at which when you don't have the audience mics, you sound like an island. And there's a certain point when you have the audience mics correct that it almost feels like you're not wearing in-ears. It feels like you're listening to it very natural. And I think you need to find that spot. Once you find that, then everything suddenly becomes very natural. Everything starts sounding very natural. And I think that's what the musicians generally
because
look for.
see, in a sound check situation, it might be difficult. There's no audience,
No, you're looking. It's not about the audience. It's about the ambience. You want it to sound like, it's like saying you're not the same old thing. You don't have your ear to the guitar amp. You're listening to it from 6 feet away. But when you have a guitar DI'd going into your ears, it's like you're listening to it from the speaker. That's not how you listen to it. It's not about the audience clapping. It's about the actual room. You want to listen to it like it's in a room. So you're looking for more ambience, and then as part of that, when the audience is in and cheering and clapping, it's fine. But you want to listen to it ambient. You want to listen to it like you would listen to it in a real situation. So it's not so much about having the audience or no. It's about having them at sound check, so you get used to the ambience. You have the ambience coming back into the mix.
Right.
That's what makes it sound natural.
So next thing is about the mix position. So I would like to know, where do you prefer to be in the venue? How do you choose the mix position? What are the factors that you consider that will help you mix from that position? Yeah.
Generally accepted position would be kind of center in the middle of in between your PA stack. Obviously, it has to be not too far back and not too close. I suppose that would depend on the size of the venue, size of the PA. I would estimate somewhere anywhere between 60, 70 feet.
Under the balcony?
Under the balcony.
Under the balcony. Like our favorite place.
So what about you, Mujeeb?
Yeah, anywhere along the center line, not too far from the stage, not too close to the stage. We don't fuss so much about being exactly on the center line, because sometimes there's an aisle there and you can't block the aisle. So a little off to either side of the center line is also fine. I would object very strongly to being placed along the side somewhere, which happens often with private performances where other priorities are more important. I would absolutely refuse to do a concert like that. And the fact is that we allow this to happen. We allow event managers and concert promoters to place us in situations which are not ideal. We should absolutely refuse. That's when they'll learn that they can't do this. We have a function to perform there. It's not all about pretty visuals. It has to do with the fact that you have. The reason we're called FOH is because we are a part of the audience. And you cannot be a part of the audience if you're located in the back somewhere or in some remote corner where you can neither see the artist nor hear the main PA. So this is something that I would argue very strongly about.
So what about you, James? What's your favorite FOH position?
It's basically everything everyone's just said. Not too far forward, not too far back, and down the centre line if you can be. There are instances where I've done corporate shows for artists, and I've usually had an iPad and I've had to wear dress black so I look like a member of staff because these are corporate shows. And I've worked in the middle or I've moved my console from the centre to the side or back of the stage, and I know exactly then what I'm going to expect. But there are, as you say, fight against it. But there are certain circumstances where it cannot be avoided, and it could be a corporate show, and the ticket is for maybe a billionaire that wants Beyonce to come and play, and that scenario, then that's.
So Dwayne, so sometimes you don't get the luxury to be in the sweet spot that you would like to be, and especially corporate gigs and some other maybe not concerts, but there are some shows that you eventually the consoles are placed to the sides. So how do you overcome that situation? Is there a way that we can talk to them and get permission to be in the center? Is there a way that you should talk, or how do you mix from a position that you have no direct PA coverage?
Okay, so first I hate the word sweet spot because sweet spot, that means if you're in the center, you're listening to everything well, and your audience that you're mixing for is not listening to it like you're listening. So I'm okay with mixing in front of either of the two boxes. If there's a problem. My best position is in the center, where I can hear both left and right. Okay? But I'm okay with mixing in front. So I make sure that. So it's not possible for everybody to hear the same sound, but as close as possible. Especially with subs, you should know that when you get a power alley in the center, you're listening to a huge thump there, and then you step away from it, you get a low, and you're losing out. Then you go away again, it comes back again. So that is not going to work. So you make sure that your system is well aligned, so that everybody in the audience hears good quality, the sound almost as close to as what you're listening. Okay, besides that, I'm okay. I don't have to fight as long as people don't tell me. There are situations where people tell you sit at the side of the stage. So I said, and do what? He's saying, no, it's okay. I'll give you monitors. I said, okay. I don't need the monitors. What you do is turn the PA towards me. And I'll sit at the side of the stage and do it with one
I'd rather sit at home and mix in that case.
Exactly. So there have been situations like this, and absolutely put my foot down and aside of the stage. I've done it once, never do it again.
So Fali, this is the next question to you. Mostly the front row, the people who are in the front, they are the most paid seats or the VIP seats there. How do you ensure that they have a good mix? They might be right in front of your subs. And what is your judgment of the mix for those people? Especially in a venue where you're far from that position.
I mean, we've stopped doing subs down the front of stage now a long time ago. We are either flying left or right, and we're getting most of our low-end energy from the main PA. I think it's been at least maybe 5 or 6 years that we don't really run subs down the floor. And the front section tends to be just maybe 1 or 2 subs very strategically placed just in the center, just to cover a small spot. Because I remember being at shows where you're standing in the front line and you're not enjoying. And if we were not enjoying when we were 20, you can imagine if people that are like 50 and 60, it's not going to be a pleasant experience. So, past many years now, it's the The subs, whatever subs we're using, are flown left and right. Few subs on the floor in certain positions, usually just down the center, maybe 2 or 4 in the center with center fills on top just to cover that center section, but also very carefully managed. So that happens, a lot of that during sound check or during the show. If there's a systems guy, go up and do whatever. Now these are concerts, but if it was like a corporate show or a wedding show, it's like, whatever. Your PA is your front line. Your PA is not really your PA. So as long as your PA is what the people are dancing to in the front. So I focus then more on that, because usually once the corporate event is over, the wedding is over, you have 100 people on the dance floor. You don't have people in the rest of the room. So honestly, what the PA does beyond that point is fine, but you need to make sure that that dance floor now sounds great. So different situations. If it's a sit down, be careful. If it's a dance kind of corporate wedding-y kind of event, then that dance floor tends to be more important. Yeah.
So, does anyone else have anything to add to this? So, of course, this point is valid, like flying the subs and getting away with this problem. Like, what if?
And overall, it sounds much more natural doing it that way, because now
Right.
you have everything coming from one source. It's easier to time align. Phase issues are less.
Right.
And you're not. At subs also overall, but Dwayne can correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't necessarily affect the people right in the first row. It takes a little time to bloom, so it's usually the people 2 or 3 rows down that it really starts to impact. And it's like if you're in a room or with a rig that's not been aligned very well, you could just be pounding subs at front of house, not realizing that it's actually starting to really affect people in the front.
So you just fly them, or you prefer to even have some in the ground?
I prefer nothing on the floor. If I can get away with having everything in the air and just to fill up spots on the floor, that's fine. That's what I'll take.
Okay.
That'll take a lot of time aligning between the tops and the bottom. I actually do a front row, and I steer the subs. So what happens is that the energy, so if you have like 12 subs, you are distributing the energy in the whole venue. So you are not going to be hearing the sub as loud as it is if it was not steered. So you're distributing the energy towards the sides. That way, and with a decent set of center fills, it'll sound good. There's different ways. I mean, different people like to do it differently. There's no fixed rule towards how you do it. What we're trying to achieve here is equal sound. And whichever way you do it, it's not wrong if you can achieve that.
As I said earlier, it's all about coverage. As long as there's coverage within the venue, and it's going to be fine. I mean, I agree with Fali. If I can fly them, I'll get them in the air. The only times I really would say let's put them down the front is if on one day we're having a band sort of day at the festival, and then or the Thursday's like a DJ day, then subs down the front, yeah, that works. But if it's band environment, generally fly them. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, flying the subs gives you they travel further back. Yeah. So you
100%.
Get,
100%.
So because of the fact. So you can only align the bottom subs to a certain point as far as phase is concerned. And you can reach there, right? When the subs are closer to the main PA, it is easier to do that. Okay? So then those things couple on top and they throw far back. If you have again, it depends on the promoters, on the guys who are organizing the show, whether they're giving you the facilities of putting it. Sometimes they have constraints with if it's a very big artist, they will demand it, and it happens. But there are only so many few big artists. 80% of the people who perform, I'd say 90%, will take whatever they have. They have no choice. Yes. But with bigger artists, they have a choice and they can put their foot down. Yeah.
But then again, without subs in the air, nowadays you're fine. You just run your dual loaded 15s almost in full range. You get enough low end from there. In most cases, if you're not doing hip hop or really sub heavy material, reggae. If you're doing rock and roll, I mean, most of the times if you have a large enough left and right, and you tend to run them as full range as possible, you almost will not need subs on most of those gigs because all the energy comes comes actually from the PA.
You'll be surprised, actually, nowadays, with the new speaker technology, there are 12 inches. Of course, it's because of the array. If you put like more than 8 or 12 boxes in a line array, those 12 inches can go down to 35 hertz, which is plenty.
So next question is about mixing itself. So I mean, what is the approach generally that you all take in mixing? Is it for a band or for a collective of musicians? Is it what you try to achieve is something get similar to their original release, or is it something, a fresh sound that you look at to achieve in a show?
I'd never do a fresh sound. I'd always speak to the artist. The artist is paying you, and it's their music. They've spent years learning to be a songwriter. It's not my job to change it. I will do the best to get the absolute audio they ask for. So that's my opinion.
What about you, Benny?
I mean, mostly what's happening is that the artists that I'm working with do a lot of Bollywood stuff. So the songs have already been played for years. I mean, there are a lot of old songs. But what they're doing is they're now rearranging those tracks for live performance because now, they don't want to, there's stagnation that happens. So because the tracks are anyway going to, have got newer arrangements, I don't need to make it sound like the original.
Right.
In fact, I try to not. Because just to give the audience something newer to listen to. So when in that situation, then I will do it the way I think this new track should sound. If I do have to deal with an older thing, or where the artist tells me, no, I want it to sound like the original, then I'll do my best to get it that way. But mostly I would go with the newer sound. Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Fali? So when you get into mixes, what is that you try to achieve on the PA?
Like James said, it depends on who's paying you. If it's a singer that's paying you, you better make sure that vocal is up and loud and clear, and everything else can come later. But if it's a regular rock and roll band, like Blackstrat Blues or whatever, then it's about the entire band. But I try and get a good, even mix of everything. And if I want to try something that I think is interesting, I'll first check with them if they think it's interesting, and then I'll try it maybe in a sound check, record that bit, let them hear it. If they think it's working, then we do it. If they think it's not working, it's fine. Yeah. But again, to try not to change too much. Okay. Try for as short sound check as possible. Get done with that. Keep energy for the show. So that's generally my approach.
Right.
Yeah.
Mujeeb sir, so mostly you are with musicians who are, it's improvised music most of the time. And what measures do you take to learn what are they going to play, and how do you know the cues, who plays what, where? How much is it important to be in the rehearsals?
Nobody ever tells me anything. So I never know what's going to happen. I try hard to figure out what they're going to do next or what they're going to do tomorrow. But usually I have no clue about what is going to happen. So since the nature of the content is dynamic, my attempt would be to try and reproduce what it sounds like acoustically on stage, just to a bigger audience, as evenly as I can. And I leave the creativity to the artists, because they know better about who takes a solo and what is going to need to be heard louder. They play like that. So I just try to keep it as even as I can so that nothing really jumps out. And that's basically it. So now this means it's really important to know what the acoustic sound of that instrument is like, which means that the planning then becomes really important in terms of the layout of people on stage, the choice of microphones, the placement of those microphones, and you leave the dynamics to the artist.
I also pretty much do what Mujeeb does. I mean, I actually go and hear the instrument on stage, to see what it sounds like. I actually, from a very long time, from almost when I started into doing audio, I actually go and tune the drum kit, because today there are lots of drummers who are very, very talented, but they have no clue how a drum kit should sound. So you help them out there, You go there, make sure. Sometimes you get the rental company, the backline guy gives you a kit that the skins are like 15 years old. You know, at least it looks like that, and it's gone completely dead. There's nothing that you can do about it. So I make sure that when I go and see the drum kit, I kind of look at the skin, call up the vendor, man, please change these skins. You know, so these things you could do. But yes. You have to go on acoustic instrument, go there and listen to it.
I think you've both hit on a really interesting point, and that's that I've taught engineers in my time, the younger generation, and one of the things I've done with them is I've said, come with me, and stood next to a drum kit. They've never mixed front of house before, or they're learning to mix front of house, and they've got gates, comps, EQs, everything they could possibly want. And I've just said, let's go and stand next to the drum kit and listen to the drummer play at full dynamics, and go, that's the drum kit that he's invested in. This could be 7,000, 8,000 euros. That's what it sounds like. That's what he wants it to sound like. Of course, we go back to the front house and we add some extra gating and all those sort of things. But tonality is so important to that's why they've chosen that kit. That's why the artist has chosen that drummer. So, it's to just consider those things. And it was your 2 points that made me think of it.
Okay, next thing is about consistency. Like, so when you're a touring engineer with a certain band, what do you ensure? I'll start with Fali. What do you ensure to bring in consistency from one show to the other?
I think that's the key when it comes to this touring business, and especially if you're touring, whether it's 50 people or 50,000 people, that consistency in how it translates is, I think, the most important. So what you have to do for that, choosing your team accordingly, choosing the equipment you want accordingly, I think is and I think consistency, the other thing, especially when you're on tour, is to get enough sleep. I can't stress that enough, because when you're going like 5 in a row, 6 in a row, there are times you're doing, I remember on the run I did last year, we were doing 6 in a row, 3 weeks continuously. If you're not sleeping or figuring out when you're going to get some amount of rest between those 6 in a row gigs, I can guarantee that by the time you come to the third one or the fourth one, you're not going to be listening to things the same way you did at the first show. So I think for me, back-to-back events, tours, more than anything else is to figure out when I'm going to get rest. Whether it's 1 hour before the show, 2 hours before the show, the night after the gig. But I think for me, the most important is sleep.
Yeah, I have an advantage there. I can sleep standing up in a bus.
Yeah. So what do you do to ensure consistency in mixes?
Okay, so
with the band?
The band, I rely on my tech rider and the vendors that I work with, because unfortunately, I have never had the opportunity of going on a tour with a band where we are carrying all our gear. So I have to make sure that my rider is clear as to what we want. Of course, we give a few different choices, but we stick to try to get pretty much everything the same for every concert. PAs are within a few, 2 or 3 different brands, and we try and stick to that. That's the only way I can make that. That's the only way I can try, do my best to maintain the consistency. And of course, like you said, sleep. That's important.
Okay, so yeah, we are in the last 5 minutes of the sessions, and would any one of you would like to ask any questions to any of the panelists here? Yeah,
Hello.
so,
Okay, yeah, there we go. So my question is more from the artist side, like how you mentioned that you all face grievances with monitoring on stage. Is there anything else that as an artist we could do better to help you all do a better job?
Could you do that again with the microphone close to your mouth?
Oh,
please?
sorry. I was saying that as an artist, you all mentioned earlier that you all faced grievances and that you all overcame through about monitoring using in-ears. Is there anything else that artists could do to help you do a better job?
Microphone technique.
Microphone technique.
Yeah, microphone technique.
Yeah, microphone technique.
I once said to a very nice person that just because your name is written on the bottom of the microphone doesn't mean you can hear it from the dressing room. So yeah, just when get the microphone on your mouth and sing, and then all of a sudden, all of those in-ear problems and a lot of those monitoring problems, especially for singers, will go away.
One more thing, as far as singers are concerned, if you're using in-ears, please use both. Don't use only one side. I mean, there are any number of problems that can cause, but you have to be able to convince the singer. Sometimes if it's a big name singer, he's stuck on this thing. I'm feeling too isolated. That's why I take one out. It's a bit of an uphill climb there, but that's important.
Thank you.
Don't be afraid to ask the artist either, because if polite, be lovely, communicate, and they're going to go, I've noticed the difference. Thank you so much. Don't be afraid. They're especially some of the younger artists. Some of the pop bands and stuff I've worked with, they're coming up. They want to be the best at their game, and they want to be successful. So to have your experience to pass on to them, they're gonna appreciate it, and the end result is better. Yeah, that's why I said to you, I couldn't hear you, and then you did. So you were doing this, and then you did this, and I heard you, and then you did this. That's exactly it. It's no disrespect or anything. It's just you literally, your mouth's there.
Hi. For a given venue, prediction software will usually tell me the amount of boxes I need to use, but there's this common notion that let's put more just to have headroom. So I'm a little confused about this, that should I go for optimum, or should one go for optimum, or should there be more boxes? Because obviously that's going to make a difference to your FOH dynamic. So could I have your inputs on this, please?
Want me to answer?
Well, more boxes doesn't necessarily mean more headroom. Okay, now you're seeing more and more, in fact, it's pretty much all line arrays everywhere. And the design of the line array has to do with uniform coverage, not with headroom. So more boxes doesn't necessarily mean more headroom. If the venue can be covered correctly with, let's say, 8 boxes aside, there's no reason to use 9. If you want it louder, that's a different design. Now, I mean, the old thought process went like this. Oh, you want it louder? Let's stack a couple more boxes. This complicates matters because of alignment. Now, the same rules don't apply for line arrays.
Does it have anything to do with the ceiling? Would you take that into consideration in an indoor closed venue or an outdoor venue? Would that determine as to, or as long as you're hearing it clean and there's no wash and there's no nasty shit going on,
So
you're okay with it?
I'll tell you the 3 ways I do it, and it's with 3 different artists. One is literally the studio technique, close snare. So I'm getting the snare drum as well as the overheads. The other is the classic, like that. And then the other is underneath.
Yeah, I want to ask how to deal with a situation where artist is demanding something that is technically incorrect from the FOH angle. For example, they ask for punch, and more punch will be distorting in live or main PA, sorry. Then how to deal such kind of situation?
Can we use foul language here? Tell him to fuck off.
I was going to say you're probably compressing the channel too much. I once had an artist turn around to me and say, I want it more purple. Okay. And I went, okay. Literally, I want it more purple.
Subs on PA or aux?
I don't care.
Subs are on aux.
Aux.
Yeah.
I work with both.
Subs on PA because I have less to do. But if it's done fine, there's no real issue there.
Yeah, that's
If it's a gig where I
that's
need to keep
laziness, but I agree with him.
If it's a gig where I need to keep riding the subs, then obviously I want it separate. But if it's not, I don't bother.
Depends on the artist, doesn't it, really?
Depends on the artist,
and the music content.
Depends on the content.
But always left, right sub fill. Always. The more control you've got, the better. Because you might need to bring those fills down for whatever reason. Or the subs up, or the subs down. So. Always left, right subfill. Always. Just don't go into it without. I've gone into a gig before just left, right, and they wouldn't give me control of sub or fill, and I ended up having to EQ the left and right mix, which ruined everything. So it was either I had to compromise, but they wouldn't let me have left, right subfill. I mean, this was about 10 years ago, but I from that moment flatly refused to accept that ever again.
Actually, most festivals don't give you sub control either these days. Like some of them do, but a lot of festivals where you walk in, it's left, right, but in most of those cases and most of those festivals, everything's done pretty well, so it's not affecting you too much. But there are definitely festivals that won't give you sub control. It's left, right, and have fun. Just because of the management, the way things are set up, it's just easier and faster. And honestly, in festivals, there's no time. If you get a sound check, if you're lucky enough, great. Otherwise, you're in and out in 20 minutes, half an hour at the most. So there's no time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming, all the panelists. I would like all the panelists, please stay here on stage for a second. We would like to give a small token of appreciation. Can we have the certificates? No, sir, sorry. You can continue that later. Please give a round of applause for Mr. Vijay Benegal, Mujeeb Dadarkar, Fali Damania, Dwayne Das, James Baker, and Jayakrishnan Nalinkumar. Thank you so much, panelists, for the great and wonderful session. As we come to the end of day one of our conference, IRA, Indian Recording Arts Academy Awards, is being held at Harman Live Arena from 6:15 p.m. and you guys are most welcome there. So please join us there.